Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go. Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Eating at a Meeting. I am your host over here, Tracy Stuckrath, and I am actually in Canada today. Yeah, woohoo! Today I spoke, and I am speaking again tomorrow at the PCMA Canada East Canadian Innovation Conference in St. John, New Brunswick, which is in the upper corner of Canada. I actually went to an earlier time zone than the East Coast, which I was really kind of blown away and excited about. So I'm here with these three wonderful ladies. I'm going to have you all introduce yourselves and tell everybody what you do and what your role is in planning this convention. They are the conference planners for this convention. And so I've got Heather, Erica, and Natalie. So Heather, tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Hello, folks. Heather Reid. I am this year the president of the PCMA Canada East chapter. I've been an entrepreneurial event planner for 30 years, and now I consult with clients on negotiating contracts.
You give out a lot of really good information on your LinkedIn profile.
I try.
Yes, you do. You do a good job. Yes. Erica?
So I'm Erica Orecchio. I'm the secretariat for the PCMA Canada East chapter. And in my working life, I work for Absolute Conferences and Events. So we do event planning and association management.
Okay.
So I do all kinds of things.
All right.
Awesome. And I'm Natalie Marino. I am the chair of the Canadian Innovation Conference this year. So it's my pleasure to work with these lovely ladies. And in my real work, I am a senior project manager at LifeLearn Animal Health. So we plan events for veterinarians and veterinary tech.
Wow. Very cool. And your clients are what?
Corporate planners, association planners, incentive houses.
Okay. And Erica, what about you? Associations?
Yeah, we focus on associations and we focus within Canada, but we do go across Canada depending on the client.
Okay. And some clients want to leave and across provinces. Yes, exactly. Okay. So Heather, you heard me, or you hired me, or somebody hired me to speak. When was that? Last year?
A couple of years ago.
Okay.
Yes. So I have followed you on LinkedIn for a very long time. I heard you speak somewhere.
Okay.
And so then I belong to another association of independent planners. And that's where the first invitation was to them.
Mm-hmm.
And because I feel your message and your methodology are so, so important. I have no food allergies, but I am responsible for people that do have dietary needs and allergies and things like that. So you brought that presentation to our little group. And then this year around, when I got to have a little bit of say in the program, I'm like, we need Tracy here because this is about educating planners and venues about the importance of providing accessibility with people's food choices. And so that was really kind of how it got started. And we're thrilled you've been with us.
Well, I'm very excited to be here. And that event was very fun because I did it via Zoom.
Yes, you did.
And I don't know if you know this, they projected me up onto the screen. So there was a picture of me as well as, and then I could see everybody. And I'm like, okay, you over there in the room, raise your hand and talk. And so it was a very interactive Zoom presentation. But so, and my presentation here, by the way, is JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Accessibility. What does food and beverage have to do with it? So I worked with the three of you to look at the menu. So tell the audience about when you were planning the menus, and you can do it with this conference, but then also with your own, what was your intent in helping people eat at this conference?
So I will jump in and take that one. So actually, when Heather brought your mentality and your presentation and your philosophy to our team.
This is not about me, but this is about food and beverage. Okay. just to clarify for everybody.
So when you brought your message of the food and beverage and the accessibility, it definitely resonated with myself as a planner. I know typically, venues will try to accommodate, but there will always be that one separate meal wrapped in foil all by itself on a table, and it's very awkward, and it's drawing attention to the fact that somebody has a special need or dietary restriction, and it's not something that people like to advertise, and it's not fair to them that they have to have a separate meal that's been sitting out there getting cold versus everybody else who gets to eat off the buffet or get plated at the same moment. So it was just, it was time for our industry to start understanding the accessibility requirements and the needs as we move forward in our food and beverage. I mean, food and beverage is huge at events, and we need to make it accessible for people where it's not attention being drawn to them, but we're giving them all the information, we're being transparent, and providing all of the ingredients and all of the listing and everything so that they can make their own informed choices as to what they're going to eat.
Yeah, very well said. Thank you. I mean, and it is something, and in my session this morning, I mean, just people got a little passionate about, the struggles with presenting it. So Erica, can you share the struggles that you had with this conference and other ones? You don't have to don't name names.
Struggle 1, struggle 2.
If you don't have this kind of like at the forefront, it's really easy when you're sending in a dietary list for someone to get missed.
Right.
And so if we do miss someone on that list, if we're transparent about what we're providing, if we're showing our attendees, not only what we're serving, but what's in what we're serving, we're allowing them the freedom to look at, privately on their phones or however you choose to display that information. They have that opportunity to really privately look at what's being served, and they can pick and choose what they like.
Right.
And it's especially helpful for if you have like a plated service, because you can then look and go, hey, you talk to your server, you say, I see that there's this, I put in, here I need this type of restriction.
Right.
So it's helpful for us because let's face it, we're not mind readers.
Right.
Specifically for PCMA, it's helpful that most of us know each other, so we can anticipate that a little bit better.
Right.
But let's say you have a client where you don't know all your delegates, right?
Right.
And maybe when they're registering, they oh, you know what? I forgot I can't eat salmon. And we decided that we were going to do something different and serve salmon for lunch. So it's helpful that we get that information out there, and we get it out relatively early.
Right.
So we put it out when we launched the app about a week before the conference.
Okay.
So that way our people are prepared,
right,
and they know what they're getting into, and that they know, okay, so I might need to bring my EpiPen as a backup, or I need to bring my allergy meds as a backup, or something like that. So at least we give them that opportunity to prepare.
Right.
Yep. Yep. Or if they can't eat anything on the buffet for any reason, at least they can grab food or bring something else with them if they need to.
Right.
Which is obviously not ideal and not the situation we want people to be in. But knowing all of those ingredients and everything, I think, helps people plan.
Yep.
And as planners, that's top on our list to help other people plan.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
We can certainly appreciate that opportunity.
Yes. So in the planning process here, and we're all on the planning side versus the venue side. And last night was a nice opening reception with a variety of different vendors in the city market, which is really cool. The oldest farmers market in Canada. And that was a great location to do that. What did they embrace the fact that you wanted to know what was in their food? Was it a hard sell? How did you do that?
So initially, I think it probably caught them off guard because it's not a request that they'd had before. But once we explained the purpose behind it and what we were trying to do for our attendees, I feel like all of the food and beverage providers embraced it willingly and happily, because they also wanted to be transparent, and they wanted to make sure that people were able to eat their food and not have any reactions. I mean, no food and beverage vendor ever wants anyone to have a reaction to eating their food. So I think it gave them a bit more peace of mind and made it easier for them to put their food out with, more pride, I felt.
Yeah. And it does help that we're on the East Coast and they're known for their hospitality.
Yes. Very true.
Heather, what did you think with last night? And
I thought it was fantastic. Yeah. It allows, I didn't look at it for last night, but I have looked at it for here at the convention center in the breaks. And And I think there's lots of area for improvement for what we did, but this is the first iteration.
Yes.
And we coined it culinary concierge.
Yep.
And so really it's kind of one spot where people know that they can go. We included it in the app, and we've included in like the know before you go kind of thing that this is coming.
Right.
And so I think the feedback that we'll get from the
Right.
attendees about was it successful? What could we have done differently will certainly help.
Right.
But I think for a first attempt, we are blessed to work with Encore, who, as you know, loves innovation. And so they kind of helped us run with this idea to just say, okay, how could we do this? So it was an exploration of what is possible. What can we do with the volunteers,
Right.
limited, support as far as, things are crunched at, 2-3 weeks out.
Yep.
And so I'm proud of what we did and hope to improve it, but we hope it's maybe a thing that other planners will at least attempt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
And we've definitely already been hearing some great feedback about, people so excited that they finally know what's in all the food so that they are able to make those informed choices.
Yeah.
And as a pilot project, I think this is a really good kickoff.
So Erica, will you explain the different ways that
Yes.
you educated or provided the information to attendees?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, I will acknowledge Encore. They had the culinary concierge station that was in the meal room, and you could actually go up and touch it, and it changed for each meal, and you could touch each item and it would flip over and you could see what was included. And that included everything from bread to all the way down to herbs and spices.
Yep.
So it was very comprehensive as best we could. We also uploaded a document into our app that listed the menus for each meal in one PDF under like a section called accessible information. But we also broke that up into sections, and we updated the menus for each different session that we included in the app.
I love that. Yeah.
So it was available in a couple of different places. And we also made sure that, not only at our opening and closing receptions, but here as well, we had labels on the buffets just to make sure that it was obvious.
Right.
We use QR codes.
Yep. We use
A
QR
lot
codes.
of it was QR code based. So
Yeah, because I went over to, and I will show a video of that using and how excited I was by it, because I did it this morning. But it also did say, scan this QR code and here's the menus. So if they weren't looking at it at their app, they didn't download the app, because some people just don't download the apps. They could get it that way.
Yeah. And we did actually have that QR code on our main
On our
section
car
screen
slides.
as well,
All right, awesome.
looping through, so people could scan it at any point in
Okay.
time and check any piece of the meal. So.
Yeah, which was also very helpful because it meant we didn't necessarily have to print the menus and put them on the tables.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So we could keep it all consistent and a little bit more streamlined. More sustainable.
More
Absolutely.
sustainable. And then because it's broken down by the food function, it's not a long 10-page document that, I'm assuming that the QR, did you have a different QR code for each meal?
Yes.
No. Or
The
you-
QR code itself was the same, but
Okay.
for the different meal functions, it would shift.
they changed it.
Yeah,
They would change
So
the
yes,
content.
same QR code,
Yes.
but for breakfast, you scan the code and it shows you breakfast. At lunchtime, that same QR code showed the lunch menu.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
It was
awesome.
constantly being updated
Okay.
by the crew at Encore.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know you could do that. That's something I learned today. Okay. Change the data, and which is good. I guess that makes complete sense. But that's really great too, because then if the tech team is updating it on the back end, it's really makes it easier so that you only have that one QR code.
Yes.
Yeah.
And people don't have to scan 5 zillion of them. I just had a question in my head. And technology wise, and even PDF wise, it also is, because I was talking to the guy from Encore today, and I know we were on a deadline to get the information in, but the information on that app is only as good as what we can get from our suppliers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so when you're planning these things out, you really do need to work with your food and beverage partners a lot to understand that. And so in this venue is catered by the Hilton, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So, and that chef was really willing to work with you and figuring all that out?
Oh,
Yeah,
he
yeah,
was
yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
He was great. He's like, you know what? I always have these recipes. It's really easy for me to pull, and it's not like I'm hiding anything. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh.
that's really nice. Yeah, because sometimes
me.
Yeah.
Okay. Phil from Hilton.
Phil from
John.
Hilton.
Yeah.
St. John, we like
Shout
you.
out to
And-
Phil.
Yeah, I'm gonna go find you tomorrow, Phil. Yes, and that's a really important thing, because I actually shared an experience. I was actually at a hotel last week that I was at, and I had an allergic reaction a couple of years ago, And I showed a picture of the server who figured it out, what the ingredients were. And she's been there for 34 years. So she still works at the hotel. And she was like, oh my God, hi. But I showed her a picture to somebody and I'm like, does she still work here? But they ended up, that hotel had 2 recipes with the same name, but different ingredients. And the chef switchover or something, the line cook switchover, they used a different recipe. So yeah. So I'm glad that he's got those and they're readily available. Just everybody make sure your recipe names are different, right? Yes. So moving forward and with all of your own clients outside of this, planning wise, but contracting wise, Heather, how do you incorporate food and beverage contracting into your overall contracts when you're working with your clients?
How long do you have?
We can talk as long as you want, as long as everybody will listen. Yes.
Some clients are not interested in that part of it.
Yeah.
Other clients are very particular about laying out, everything has to be labeled. There has to be the chef available to consult with those with dietary restrictions. So a lot of clients, if they're really focused on that accessibility piece, they will contract for it. I find the labeling to be very important and consistency in labeling. But I would say more contracts are signed without those really refined details. I think that comes probably more with your CSM when you get to that stage of menu choosing. But certainly I know I for my own clients always booked, I want that very first day an appointment with the chef. I want the chef there for a couple of hours. So anyone with dietary restrictions could come and meet the chef and explain to them what their restrictions were. Right. But I think this app is even a better iteration than that because the chef's not on the floor. Right. The chef, is behind the scenes and preparing and choosing, but not the ones executing. And this way, even some banquet staff are not informed as to they're just not informed as to what's in it.
Right.
And so this way, being proactive, we can assure our attendees that, those things I think the more that we as planners ask for these things, when I know you're on that mission, right. Is to make it, we'll see it in contracts, but I don't see it a lot.
Yeah. And I think it's something that we need to think, one of the things we need to think forward on it, but one of the things I also ask in my RFPs as well is how many people on your staff are allergen trained or what's your health inspection score?
That's what I learned from you. So please,
So because you want to, you go into a restaurant and you see the A or the 90 or the 95, whatever, but ask the health inspection score of your hotels and your catering companies. They have to have that as well to serve food. But I really do think that you need to be asking those questions because they are responsible for feeding a lot of people.
Yes.
And you want to know, who is serving that food? How is it being prepared in the back of the house? So I love the fact that you've got the chef, asking for that chef to be available. The executive sous chef, the executive chef, the banquet chef, whichever one it is that's over all of that. I think it's very important to have that person available to you to answer questions for sure. How are you two going to apply what you've done with this conference in your planning of other conferences?
So for me, it's definitely going to be something that I bring up to all my clients as something that they should consider doing. I feel like I can't go back now at this point. We've gotten to a point now where I feel this is the best approach to the food and beverage and making sure that everybody who has dietary restrictions is still able to eat everything and not leave a conference starving or have to go buy their own meals. So it's definitely going to be on my list of questions for all my clients now moving forward.
Okay.
Yeah, I think she nailed it. We can't really go back either, I don't think. Certainly for this conference, but even we do a number of conferences for various clients, and I will always recommend that we take this approach because I just really think you can't be too cautious these days.
Right.
And more information is better.
Yeah.
We've been spoiled now.
But I think there's also, we have to acknowledge that it's not just building in that, but it's building in the budget to have this.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, we were blessed with Encore. We've been a long-standing partnership with Encore for this conference, that they always top it up.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But I think planners need to build in, because it's not free. It's labor intensive.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Just even the behind the scenes for the QR codes, for the building of what it looks like and all of that. You have to budget for it.
Absolutely.
So we will have to budget for that next year for this conference. So
right.
And budget your time.
Yes.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
a,
Oh,
it's a
takes-
new
as-
thing.
It's a
Yeah.
new thing.
As the
and
person who does that, it takes a lot of time.
It takes
Yeah, it
time.
does.
It does. And it's a learning curve. And I mean, you know, it took us a while to get here, but now that
Right.
we're here, we have to budget our time to make
Right.
sure that
Mhm.
we are looking at it from all angles, and can we have it available easily? And how do we have it available easily? And how long does it take for us to make sure that it's available easily?
Right.
And involving the chef in those conversations earlier as well. I mean,
Mhm.
most event planners just pick a menu off the list and don't even think twice about it.
Mhm.
Whereas, you know, now we're wanting to have conversations with the chef to actually get the detailed ingredients, which many people don't ask for. So it's a matter of getting the chefs involved in the conversation earlier.
Right.
Similar to, you know, when we did the switch to hybrid, it was talking about getting the AV companies involved
Mhm.
earlier. I think we need to shift that mentality as well and get the kitchen staff involved in these conversations earlier.
I definitely agree. And I think that's a conversation. It's the chef as well as the banquet captain, because the majority of the time, and I'm going to say 99.9% of the time, which is basically all of it,
Yep.
the front of the house, the banquet teams are the ones responsible for making the labels,
Mhm.
and the ones in the back of the house are responsible for making the food. So they're asking the question of who's got that right information, and confirming is a really important conversation to have and to confirm. One thing I wanted to bring up is you and Allison and I and Chef were talking before the conference, and we were going to only put it on the app, right? And
Yes.
not label the food. And I'm like, well, not everybody, some food looks the same.
Yes.
And can you
Yes.
talk through that?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it might not necessarily be the sustainable choice to
Right.
also have those labels printed, but it is the best choice to have it available any which way, because as we know, our delegates will look some places, but they won't look in others. So
Mhm.
it just takes that one extra step just to make sure
Right.
that everything is covered. And of course, after talking to you, we made sure that was going to be the case going forward, because not everyone's going to think to check their phone
Right. Or
Yeah.
download the app.
or download the
Yeah.
app. Yeah,
And I would
exactly.
think there might be an aspect. I know for myself, I'm not a foodie. I
Mhm.
love food, but I'm not a foodie. And so some of these lovely names that are for some of these meals
Right.
and
Mhm.
foods that we eat, if I was to look at the name, I wouldn't know how that translated to what it looked like.
Right.
And so I think
That's
there's
true.
also, we need to make sure that it's labeled so someone can go, oh, that's the whatever. Like, I'm going
Right.
to use lasagna. We all know what lasagna looks like. But for something that was maybe a more cultural or ethnic food that I wouldn't know necessarily what the name of it was,
Right.
it appears on the app, but what is it?
Right.
And so
Mhm.
I think also then you can make that connection between, oh, that's what that was. And I can, I think of Allison.
Hi, Allison.
She's still on the job. We're done.
Yeah.
That's a really good point, because even fancy words for cheese,
Yes.
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
people don't know that means cheese,
Yes.
or a fancy name for salmon or something like that, right?
Yes.
People
Yeah.
don't necessarily know what that is.
I'm one that doesn't know those names.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Well, yeah. And you can take it from the other direction too. So like, for example, if you have, I don't know, green curry.
Right.
Everybody makes that differently.
Mhm.
Mhm.
There could be 1,000 different ways that you make that particular type of curry. So it's important that those are labeled and, you know, you have the ingredients available, because, it's like, I make green curry all the time. I can eat it here.
Right.
Yep.
No,
No.
maybe this place
Mhm.
makes it with peanuts.
Right.
It's funny. I was just going to say the same thing along
Yeah.
Heather's line of the
Yeah.
lasagna. You know, you make your lasagna one way, then you may make it
do you put
another
cottage
way.
cheese in yours?
I do not, but we were talking at
Wrong
lunchtime
to it.
today about, you know, somebody had made a vegetarian lasagna, and
Yep.
vegetarian lasagna can have a multitude of things in
Mhm.
there. And unless you actually have that list of ingredients, you don't know specifically what's inside that vegetarian
Right.
lasagna.
Well, and I've made vegetarian lasagna using cashews, and you soak the cashews in water, they get soft, and then you mix it with an egg, or if you're making it vegan, without the egg, and cilantro or parsley, and that makes a ricotta,
Oh,
which is
ooh.
but you would never know. It
No.
does not taste like cashews, but you need to label that because it's a nut
Nut
allergy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So really, and I think that's one of the challenges too with dietary restrictions like vegan and vegetarianism with food allergies, because so many vegan options are made with soy and nuts and wheat, that you're not necessarily thinking about the allergens when you're trying to make those things too. So, because a lot of people try to do the vegan gluten-free thing together.
Yes.
And and that's hard.
That's right. It's very challenging because you don't necessarily want to serve someone who's, let's say someone's vegan. You don't necessarily want to serve someone like a bowl of plain spaghetti because you want them to enjoy their experience.
Right.
But you have to ask your food and beverage supplier to be a little creative, because it's like, you could get a person who doesn't eat meat for ethical reasons or whatever. There's so many reasons why you wouldn't eat meat, but they could also have a number of allergies.
Right.
So it's definitely challenging.
And there is a meat allergy. There's a mammalian allergy. Yeah. So they can't have the animal product, the products, the dairy or anything from it, as well as the meat products. So that's a whole nother thing. On my slides today, and you guys didn't see them, I had pictures of all the different pies that are famous in each province. And I don't remember which one this was, but there's a seal flipper pie that's like
one of the territories.
In one of the territories, yeah. I'm like, and somebody was from there and they're like, yeah, that's a real thing. I don't eat it, but that's a real thing. But that's a whole nother thing too, because even like there's the flapper pie. And when I looked it up on Google, I got pictures of it, but it looks like a lemon meringue pie. The meringue is like this tall. But when I looked it up to find a photo of it, really, I got female flappers from the 20s. I'm like, that is not going to work, when I was trying on iStock to try to find that pie. So, but so going back to the way people make things, they make them completely different. And that's cultural differences that we have to incorporate. So how did you incorporate anything culturally relevant for where we are into the menu this time? And I don't know, so I'm really asking.
Yeah, no, so we did work very closely with the team here at the St. John Trade and Convention Center to try to get some local flair into it. Okay. So anytime we plan the Canadian Innovation Conference, we do try to lean local for a lot of our meals and everything. So not just local flavor and local flair, but also locally sourced.
Okay.
So that is something that we do request from the venues and our food and beverage suppliers.
Well, and in that conversation, oh my gosh.
I know exactly where you're going with this.
Oh my gosh. I asked Chef, I'm like, so where do you get your stuff locally? Who can we support? He's like, you mean our seafood? Because other food comes from Montreal. Mm-hmm. Which is a 9-hour car ride? Was it 11?
I think it was 11 because they have to take a special route.
Right.
To get there. Yeah. 11-hour transport.
Yeah.
For sure.
So that's something to really when you're trying to do sustainability wise, really take into consideration when you're trying to bring in that cultural, because it's super cold here. Yeah. Right. And you can't grow those vegetables in the wintertime. So
So locally sourced where you can.
Right.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think you did a good job last night at the market too, because that market was showcasing food and beverage that was here. And it's, like I said, the oldest market in the country. And I also found out on the walk there, that's the oldest library in the country is in the underground, which I think is fascinating that we're walking underground to go to everything. But okay, so what things did you learn from this process that you want to take forward? Anything that jumps out that you're like, hey, I really want to do this differently for next year or for your next conference?
I've got one thing while they think.
Okay.
Accessibility takes planning.
Mm-hmm.
It cannot be a last minute thought.
Mm-hmm. So true. And
in every aspect of accessibility.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And walking to the city market last night, right? That escalator that was down, you can't plan that, right? No. I mean, thankfully there was that elevator that was right there.
Yes.
And it was nice that there's even one like right there in front of the city market. There was the escalator up, there was the elevator, and then there's the stairs that you can take up or down. But there was no down escalator, I noticed. But really making sure all of those things are working. Yeah.
And working closely with your host destination to, again, well in advance to make sure that those things are working, especially if you're bringing a number of people into town.
Right. Yeah. And you did have signage all the way through with arrows.
Yeah. And we had a trolley for those that my knees are shot. So the trolley was there. So it's just thinking of all that. Treat people how you want to be treated. So try and think of what do I need and what would I prefer.
Right.
And I think if you think of it as a host in your own home, what would you do? Those need to be thought of for large groups.
Right.
So
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Or what about you, Sue?
So, I mean, definitely, site visits are very important to see
Mhm.
the lay of the land.
Mhm.
I did a site visit once, and one of the breakout rooms they suggested did not have an elevator, escalator. It was a flight of stairs, and that was the only way to get to that room. And we had to turn down the venue because that was not something that would be accessible for our members. And
Right.
it's just planning those things and recognizing those things.
Right.
And again, it's the forethought.
Right.
Developing anything, any kind of programming, any kind of event with accessible mentality, it can't be an afterthought. It has to be right away at the pre-planning stages when you're sourcing your venues and your suppliers. It definitely takes time to get everything in place.
Yeah.
Erica?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And I mean, I've said it a couple of times already, so I apologize for repeating myself, but I think that
Repeating is a good thing. We all remember that way.
I really think transparency
Mhm.
in all things has to be at the forefront of what we do, like with everything, with accessibility, with food that we offer, with any, let's call them hiccups. I
Mhm.
think that might come up.
Mhm.
Like we need to show that we're prepared for any eventuality. And I mean, we are trained to think on our feet, but we're also trained to have that forethought. And that's a skill that's developing all the time.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I know for myself personally that it takes practice, and
Yeah.
you only get better with time for
Yeah.
sure. So I think that, the more we start to incorporate these habits into our planning, the more it's just going to become instant. It's
Yeah.
like, that's what you do. Add that to the
Yeah.
critical path, make sure that it's done.
And hopefully other people attending the conferences will also
Right,
get on
exactly.
that bandwagon
Right,
and start
exactly.
thinking about that when they plan.
So
Yeah.
we offered a nursing room
Yep.
and a multi-faith prayer room.
Mhm.
And it is best practice, but it came because I got caught with my pants down, so to speak. And I hadn't thought of it for an event. And so the very first day we had someone come in and say, "What are you putting in the nursing room? I know I need to put that with my event."
Oh, wow.
Right. So
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
as an association that's in the industry,
Right.
we should be showing and experimenting. And
Mhm.
I think we've tried it in a couple of different ways. So the
Right.
food, I think, we've done a great first effort. And I
Yeah.
think you've really helped us really hone in on what is critical.
Well, and listening into Lisa's session today, it was really about strategy and thinking through things. And even with all of the two keynotes, Daniel and I don't know, Solange, thank you, Solange. It was, I think all three of them presented very critical thinking thought points for all of us to figure out how to look at something different. Daniel was like, ask why, and then why again, and why again. And then Lisa today was like, tell me more about that. Right. And so and then again, say, tell me more about that, because then you're getting down to the thought process of different things. And food and beverage is our number one expenditure. And I say this all the time. I know you've heard me say it 211 times on this podcast. It is our number one expenditure, and it's the thing that we think the least amount about. And you all did that forethought, thinking about it a lot more this year than you've had. And how far in advance did you really start talking about the food and beverage?
Oh goodness.
Well, you were on our radar in June.
Okay.
So
And we're in November.
Yep.
So 5-6 months.
Yeah. Okay. And that's well in advance of what time, when do you start thinking about your food and beverage, right? Typically when the deadline is due, right? And you give that registration list and you're like, oh, here, chef, manage it, right? And they're probably cursing you in the back.
Yeah, you send your numbers, you
Right.
pick your menu, you say, here's a dietary list, and you're like, go. But
Right.
no, not this time. We
Yeah.
really made an effort to think critically about it.
And okay, and there was one slide that I did years ago, and I put a plate out there, and it's transportation and speakers and housing and all these words that trickle down, and food and beverage, and then ADA accessibility, and all of these things that come into play into that. You all said it needs to be part of the critical conversation, going forward. And with food and beverage being sustainability wise, what did you talk about, chefs? I'm just throwing this out there. Sustainability wise, I noticed the breaks didn't have excessive, vertical buffets and a lot of things. It was very limited. And I liked that, because what if it's okay if we run out of food, right? We don't want to run out of food, but can you talk through, was any of that sustainability driven or budget driven or just whatever?
It was experience driven.
It was experience driven.
I'm
Okay,
gonna
talk
say-
more about that.
Because at the helm of Absolute is
Mhm.
Allison, who's been in the industry for
Mhm.
30 plus years.
Right.
And I think she has honed in on a group of this size would consume typically maybe our AGM. And she said she was actually spot on for the guarantee.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes. So I think it's experience. So
Mhm.
if you don't have experience, hook up and mentor with someone who does,
Yes.
because those are costly lessons you can avoid.
Right.
And tap into someone that does have that skill set, that's been around and knows human nature.
Right.
I'm not sure if it was a sustainability. Like,
No, not
you
as
don't want
much.
excess. Like,
No.
absolutely don't want excess.
No, but in a lot of the food and beverage that we selected for our breaks
Yes.
and everything was stuff that, or items that weren't going to go bad. So,
Right.
like, wrapped granola bars or bags of trail mix, things that,
Right.
Yes.
if it didn't get taken away, at least it can go back and doesn't have to get
Great
thrown
point.
into the
Right.
garbage,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
It was,
Mhm.
it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
thought of in a multitude of layers, I
Yeah.
feel.
Consumption items.
Yes.
On
Yeah.
consumption based items. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and I like that because knowing your history
Yeah.
of your event, if you're doing the same event over and over again, you can see the patterns.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of people that just, one, they don't have the time to look at it because they don't have the additional support staff to look at it, but it is another way to save money. Yeah.
And that is actually one downside I find with a lot of planners is they make sure that the food is put out, but they don't pay as much attention as to how much food goes back at the end.
Right. Or what's even in the back of the house that hasn't been
that-
served.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Or, where does it go? Does it just
Yeah.
get thrown
Yes.
out? Does the
Mhm.
venue have a donation policy for food that's left over?
Mhm.
I mean, that's another piece that we should really
Right.
be thinking about because there
That's definitely in the contract.
Yes. Good. Yes, that's good.
there are always homeless shelters that could benefit from having meals.
Right.
And if it doesn't get eaten, it's better than throwing it in the garbage.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely a multifaceted
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
For
yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And especially as much food as we order in our industry, we should be giving back and making sure that others are fed.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So my final question for all of you, which is what I ask every single guest, is what does a safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experience mean to you? I know that's a lot.
A safe.
Sustainable and inclusive.
That is a really good question.
Maybe we can group think on this one.
Yeah.
So we're together here.
Group thinking a lot.
Can I say transparency?
Yeah. Transparency, a conference where all of your attendees have the ability to eat healthy, good, delicious food
Mhm.
without having to worry that it's going to kill them or that
Or being-
or it's going to
singled
make
out
them
in
sick.
some manner.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, being singled out is
Yeah.
never a good thing. Most people want to just be part of the group, go through
Yes.
the buffet line without having to again pick up that
Yeah.
lonely little homeless plate on the side that's got their
Right.
name on it or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, really, unless it's life threatening, it's really nobody's business.
Absolutely.
And I mean, even arguably, as long as you communicate it privately, like you should be able to live your life without having to worry about stuff like that
Right.
when you
Yeah.
attend an event like this.
Or in somebody saying, "Oh, hey, by the way, I didn't tell you I was vegetarian, but I am vegetarian or vegan, and I'm going to take a plate," and then you get Erica's plate. you
Yeah.
know? Yeah,
Yep.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
too.
that happens too. So,
Absolutely.
all right, ladies, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. I appreciate you inviting me to speak at this conference. And again, we're at the PCMA, Professional Convention Management Association, for everybody who doesn't know what that means. Canadian Innovation Conference. And we have one more day, giving my session again tomorrow afternoon.
See, and there again, like that, we had you repeat
Yes.
because we have concurrent sessions.
Right.
We really felt strongly about your topic that we repeated it
Thank you.
because there's so many choices, good choices. At least, hopefully, a lot of our planners can hear
Right,
your session.
yeah.
And we know it's definitely a topic of interest for a lot of people. So we wanted to make sure that your message got out to as many of our attendees as it could.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, one of the guys this morning Paul, he's like, this needs to be a keynote presentation.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he's like, and I'm going to tell everybody that I know that wasn't in here that you should come and listen to it. So that makes me feel very good. But
that's wonderful. Tracy.
thank you for all that you all did for this conference and for feeding everybody. It's been I've loved it. It's been a lot of fun and a lot of really good people
Yes.
that have been here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a lot
Thank
that
you.
I haven't met yet. So, okay, everybody, this is another episode of Eating in a Meeting. Thank you so much for tuning in. Next week, I will be live with another guest. Name just completely escaped me. So, but we will do, actually, this is actually really interesting. Her last name is Blood and her first name is escaping me at the moment, but she's with Merits and she's talking contract. Well, she's talking law. So in the state of
duty of care.
Duty of care, there's a new thing that we should check out too, is My Health, My Data. So, and she was saying at IMEX that these new laws are being passed in states, Washington State, and there's one in Nevada and Connecticut, that food allergies comes under the health information as well as maybe its accessibility. And how are you managing that data? And so that'll be a really good conversation next week to listen into, to talk about how that we need to maybe put that into our contracts of how that data, like GDPR, right?
Yeah.
How we're managing that data, what information we're giving to our vendors, and if
What
we
are they
provide,
doing with
and
it?
what are they doing with that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
Interesting.
years ago, I was giving a presentation for Freeman, and I'll talk about this next week too, but a lawyer from Freeman, because there were a couple of people that had requested halal or kosher, and the Freeman attorney said, you need to be conscientious of that, who you're giving that information to, and especially with what's going on in our society right now, like they could be potentially targeted for their food choices.
Wow.
So really thinking through those things. So that's a precursor for next week.
I'll be tuning in.
Yeah.
So will I. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to hear this.
So 12 o'clock on Wednesdays, Eastern Standard Time. And until then, everybody stay safe and eat well. And Heather, Erica, and Natalie, thank you so much.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. All right, everybody, have a good day.
Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.